Hello everybody and welcome to the Autodesk Build webinar hosted by myself, Paul, from Micrographics, an Autodesk partner in Cape Town, South Africa. When I was given the brief to do this webinar, I was a bit overwhelmed. Autodesk Build is quite a large topic, and it is my pleasure to present, although within an hour there's only so much, I suppose, that we can cover. That said, please note that you are welcome to paste any or type any questions that you might have within the chat, and we will be welcome to accommodate you there. The webinar is being recorded and will be available for you after the event. And with that, let's jump in. Firstly, the agenda for the morning's webinar. We're going to do a quick introduction as to what Build is. We're going to talk about improving forecasts, qualification accuracy, reducing construction rework, reducing waste summary, and a question and answer. And that'll be a general discussion, and then we'll try and introduce you to a bit more of what the platform can do. We do operate from within South Africa, and so we will try and contextualize the solution within the South African environment. So for anybody else joining the webinar, apologies for that. I know you might be operating in other regions of the world, and but the arguments might still be relevant to where you are. The adoption of the technology, it's gaining pace. It's a digitization of our work and what we do. And hopefully that will be informative for you going, also trying to find your way within this new technological landscape. Alright, so as an introduction, Autodesk Build compiles the project information model during construction. What does that mean? At the beginning of a project, we usually have guys that are doing design, your architects, and the consultants, the mechanical engineers and the structural engineers and fire suppression and what have you, and they come together and they put a design together. It goes for council submission and then approval, and then eventually it has to get built. So before that happens, there are some pre-construction items that need to occur, including the submittals around materials that are getting used or specific components and all the data that surrounds that, hopefully digitized with mechanical equipment that might include things like your servicing schedules and so forth. So we want to have ultimately a digital twin with which we can manage our not only our construction site during construction, but also after construction for facilities maintenance, depending on the project. If it lends it to such a activity, then why not? We can save a lot of money in the long run. All right, so in that process, the Autodesk Construction Cloud Build is the license that is active on site. So the building information model, that is during the design side, and then the PIM or the project information model, that is during construction. That's where we gather data, record decisions, issues, conversations, submittals, RFIs, project scheduling, what happened on the project, the budget, activities, health and safety, quality assurance, quality checking, there's supply chain management, rework, and so on. A lot that happens, and it gets recorded within the project information model. And then if you want to be part of this process on ACC Build, and you can hear already that it sounds quite exciting with everything going on, you must have a license or a subscription to ACC Build, and this can apply to many roles. I once did an analysis on a supply chain where everybody from the municipal inspector to the client, the design teams, the project manager, the project engineer, the contractors, the subcontractors, one can very easily, depending on the project, envision every one of them having such a license. And these licenses or these subscriptions, they are what we refer to as bring your own subscription. It's like a bit, in South Africa you would be familiar with a bring and braai, where you bring your own meat and drink to a party, and it's the same thing within this platform, where if you have a license, then you can join anybody on their project provided you're invited. If you don't have one of these subscriptions, then you can't participate on the activities. Unfortunately, that is the reality. That speaks to the planning of the supply chain beforehand, and the licensing and the costs and the contracts and everything that is contained within that. From a personal perspective, as a consultant, I try and get involved on the side with the client themselves or with the client representative to see that we can at least adopt some useful technology and save everybody some money from the very beginning. And that might be through an exchange information request, but that is not for today's discussion. All right, so let's jump right in. What is forecasting? What I'm thinking to myself is that it might be easiest just to refer you first of all to the Autodesk Build platform. You can see this is what it looks like if you go online. That's the Autodesk Build platform. That is also a very useful cellular or mobile app that you can install on your cell phone or an iPad. And its Build is the only real license that lends itself to that through something that we call Sheets. I know we've dealt with Sheets before, but basically it's something that you publish, and you can access your Sheets if you had to go through your mobile device. So you do have 3 subscriptions with regards to Sheets. They form a central role on the management of the activities, and so you will find that you've got 550, which currently is a bit cheaper than the Docs license itself. Docs is a common platform to all these Autodesk Construction Cloud offerings, and then you can also upgrade to a 5,000 or an unlimited license from there, so there really is no excuse to not get involved. Right, the Autodesk Build Help is essentially a textbook. It shows you everything that is available within Docs, and you'll see there is a lot. Specifically, what we mean by forecasting is within a specific section called cost management. It is an offering that looks over here. If you go to cost management, that's what it looks like. It's basically a module on its own, and this requires everybody to sort of set up the project from a financial perspective, from a scheduling perspective, from a supply chain perspective, the budget, the forecasted budget, so the schedule, the costing, and whatever goes into that. And then basically you want to record, you have your planned production, and then there's the actual production that happens. You'd like to know what the difference is, and similarly you'd also like to know what potential changes down the line would look, change orders and such. And so this is what the platform looks like. You've got your budget, your cost, your change orders, your forecasts, all right? And that is part of your build, and specifically forecasting is a subsection of that, where you can essentially set it up for method-related planning, cash flow forecasting, or performance tracking. All right, so there's the help files with regards to that, and the idea is that you can very carefully manage your build, your project finances, your expected budgeting on the platform through this costing module. In South Africa, This is, as far as to the best of my knowledge, not really a capability that is currently leveraged in our industry, and I'm hoping within the foreseeable future that we can possibly adopt this on one of the pilot projects to see if we can get this operational. It's interesting when you are in a team, you're able to generate that data to interface with the forecasting. All right, so basically you want to create schedules. You can see basically the interface over here. Once you have it up and running, you can schedule and make plans. And Build has a cost model. It takes a team to implement on a project. And to date, it's not a solution that's commonly adopted in South Africa. It offers many benefits, but requires a pilot project and a team to implement. It's perfectly suited to a company that is willing to invest in R&D. It is a tried and proved solution globally, not so much within South Africa itself. So whomever has the human resources and R&D time and money available could very easily buy into the solution. It helps to define a supply chain, a project timeline, and a budget, and we can compare projected versus actual variances in the budget, and we can evaluate the impact of change orders or timeline alteration on a budget or cash flow. Very much an economic, managerial aspect of the project, and so perhaps if you have a financial officer, to have this available to them on the management team, maybe the project manager, whoever is responsible for doing that, they could get involved. Right, then qualification accuracy. So within the Build platform, the process would start off with a submittal. The submittal is documentation that you put together. So let's suppose you wanted to install floor tiles, and the floor tiles are a certain marble, and the marble has to be installed in a specific way, and you need documentation from the supplier, and you need to have buy-in from the owner, and you need everybody that's involved with it to put all the information necessary onto that submittal. Then that is how you would typically start out. Again, it's a capability that is within the Build platform to create submittals. Right. And then with submittals is how to get started with submittals, work with submittals, and submittals administration. So I was involved in trialing this some years ago with an architect, and it was quite interesting. I used to do this while I was sitting on a bus traveling to work, and he was in his office, and the interaction happened completely online. It was an interesting experience, but definitely a useful thing to do to prepare submittals that you can collaboratively work on online. So that is the submittals side of things with regards to qualification. Then pre-construction after that. It's meant to identify, clarify potential issues before actual construction can be communicated, and can be communicated via requests for information. Now, if you had done your design work and your submittals correctly, then there would not be pre-construction issues that appear, and the guys in the industry hate pre-construction work because it really comes out of their bottom line, which means that it's not something that's actually paid for. It's just, it subtracts from the profits during the project. So we want to be accurate. We want proper design, and anything else, basically, if we have to sort it out before we start constructing, that's better than what it crops up during construction. If it crops up during construction, then we have to maybe stop the site. So you can make the same argument here just to take you back historically within the 70s and the 80s or earlier, the stoppages on site just because of clash detection, in other words, components that occupy the same space where they shouldn't, would cost 1/5 of a construction project. And that is very wasteful. And so just modeling up a design in 3 dimensions and then clash detection already saves you 1/5 of the construction cost. And that happens during the design phase. This is a similar argument, but it extends from the design into the construction side. And there we can see that we want to have a very accurate design, very accurate specification, exactly what we need to design. And if there's no pre-construction, then that is a good thing, because we are not wasting our money. So that is the idea. It is a accurate design, and then it comes down to the construction itself. I've had, for instance, situations where guys have been on site, mechanical engineers, MEP engineers, and unfortunately what happens is that the construction wasn't accurate enough, and so the floors were poured 100 millimeters too low just because they were lackadaisical. And what happened was afterwards, of course, now there's no head clearance for the occupants of the building, and so the mechanical engineer had to redo the entire HVAC design, and that was very expensive, and again a total waste of money because somebody just didn't construct accurately enough. Now, you can never be perfect, but we strive to be, and there are solutions that you can employ in this regard, which includes things like point layout, but also laser scans, LiDAR, as well as photogrammetry. And quite often also, if we do want to do record modeling, then that can happen on site. But from a qualification perspective, just scanning before pouring and understanding exactly if we are going to be constructing accurately is very important. The more accurately you manufacture a building, the less rework you have to do, and the less money is wasted. When it comes to the installation again, the construction cloud or Autodesk Build has another solution, and that is forms, right? So from here we go to forms. Forms you can create. Typically they are checklists. They could be checklists for various different reasons. One of them is safety. Obviously safety is very, very important. So health and safety reasons, what's the weather, whether the guys are wearing the equipment that they should, and so on. Let's make sure everybody's safe on site. That's a very important one. And these forms can be referenced onto other things like issues, right? So issues is something you might be familiar with. Issues are things that we create to assign to somebody in track. But the forms are a way of recording information by an individual or a role on site to say that something has, for argument's sake, been installed correctly. So let's suppose that you have a checklist. Somebody is installing windows, and you have a checklist, and you say, when you install exterior windows, have you done the following? Have you used the correct sealant? Have you used the correct methodology? Have you done this? Have you done that? And if they go through the checklist, as much as one would like to think that everybody's an expert in their discipline, every subcontractor is an expert in their discipline, they might sometimes take shortcuts or whatever. And if you force them onto a form to say, have you done this in that format, in that check, in that sequence, and have you executed each one of those actions, then you get them to put their assurance on that to say, yes, I have. And it's not, if you look at the aviation industry, pilots often have checklists. They have to go through their checklists, and they do so on an iPad as well. It's also digital, so it's a commonly adopted methodology for somebody that's on site. So that's the one thing. The other way that the forms play into this would be with the payment. So I had the opportunity to speak to a manager of a very large construction company. He had 90 construction managers under him, You were saying a major headache of theirs is when can they actually pay the subcontractors? So for them, the issue about not being connected to the sites digitally, electronically via forms that could be verified was, all right, so the guy said that they've installed whatever they needed to install. I need to send an inspector out there to go and check their work. And then I need to get feedback on that and pay them as soon as possible. Otherwise, subcontractor relations and cash flow becomes an issue, and that's not something that we really want. So if somebody's done their work, we pay them. And that's the thinking here, is that, okay, we can use forms for that as well. And if the inspector goes out onto site, then he can take some pictures just to say that everything is okay. It's to spec and maybe fill out a form and submit that and reference the pictures or the videos or whatever and say this is done to satisfaction. And if all of the windows have been installed to satisfaction, then we can pay the contractor. But if any or the subcontractor, if anything is outstanding, then we would withhold payment or partial payment until that work is finished. And so that is the quality checking side of things, again, online. All right. And an important thing here is the taking of pictures and videos and being able to communicate that as references to other forms of communication. This is very useful to transfer what eyes on the ground see to the office. So if you're a construction manager and you've got 90 construction projects under you, and you can't be everywhere at once, and it's in different locations, being connected to the internet, being able to have your attention focused to a specific item through either video or images, that is very important. Right, so you can see already that as a communications platform, being able to record in perpetuity, something that is something that can be referenced to issues and everything else, that is very important. And so that's great. Then that is with the qualification accuracy. Then we get on to reducing rework, construction rework. So, what we focused on until now is what can we do with regards to setting up the project and its budget and forecasting changes to understand what will play into our workflow. And then something else that we would have to pay attention to is pre-construction, so getting the submittals ready, making sure all the information is collated, and doing pre-construction checks to make sure that we've got all the information, and sorting out any unknowns before we get to the construction site itself. That's during the construction phase. We want as little delay as possible and as few issues as possible. And so that is the idea. Then we get into construction rework. All right, so what are the usual problems? Is missing documents and details. We can usually address those through RFIs, but if you have a central repository, then that shouldn't be an issue. We also have poor or ineffective procurement methods and poor quality materials, poor supervision, failure of structural design, poor communication, no collaboration, a misunderstanding of client requirements, ineffective management and decision making, no standard systems or processes, and schedule pressures. Right. So I think anybody that's been on some form of construction project, I know I personally haven't got that much experience in large construction projects whatsoever. At best, I've built small factories in the past to instruction, and it was interesting nonetheless, because every one of those issues that is mentioned there is something that I can personally relate to on a very personal level. You don't have the documents and the details. What do you do now? You can't do anything. You can't construct it. You don't have procurement methods. Where are you going to purchase your steel? You can't just go to any old steel merchant and purchase steel. You need to go to a reputable or an authorized steel merchant and purchase steel with the certificates notifying you of their structural properties that has been tested and approved. Again, poor quality. If you purchase something and it wasn't manufactured properly, but nobody picked it up, and so you're on site, and are you really going to install something that's going to be much more expensive to uninstall from a building. You won't normally have to come in with jackhammers and smash things out of the walls and then reinstall it and stuff like that. No, you don't want poor quality. You want things that are the proper quality. Same with poor quality materials. If you don't have your certified steel, if you don't have your certified bolts, if you don't have the right cement, if the cement is too old, the cement has been lying around too long, those are issues, right? Poor supervision, you don't have the proper oversight. So something like your health and safety, the guys are not wearing hard hats or harnesses when they're climbing on the roof, so they fall through the roof and they break their heads or they break their backs, and then that is not a good solution. Instead, we want to follow the code. We have failure of structural design. Again, this, I suppose, is more on a design side, but it can be very dangerous. And so that isn't something that should happen, but that's a design issue. But if it is picked up before the time, is there a way of communicating that? If there is somebody on site and they can prevent a structural failure and possibly somebody dying, can they do so? Is there a construction? Is there a communication? Or is it just somebody that's standing on the ground saying, oh, this looks very dangerous, but I don't know who to talk to? All right? So you need to be able to have that open line of communication, of processes on site. Poor communication also feeds into that. How do you communicate? No collaboration. Okay, that again is on the design side mostly, but even on the construction side, if you don't collaborate with your colleagues, you're not going to have a sense of what's happening on the site, and then issues can happen. Communication is vital to the success of any project, as is collaboration. Misunderstanding of client requirements, that shouldn't be an issue if a BIM protocol is being followed, but that can be mitigated by use of submittals and copying the client in and just making sure they know what they're getting. We've got ineffective management or decision making. Again, data-driven decision making is very important, and ineffective management of, well, it's such a big topic really, but having a central source of information to delve and mine is important, that data. Then no standard systems or processes. Again, these days we have the ISO 11650 information protocol at least, but of course we fall within many different protocols and standards, and these can be managed using something within the build license that we refer to as specifications. So if you set your specifications up, I've started putting up specifications for some of the things, but you know, you could put all your protocols and your standards, whatever people need to have access to within specifications. Unfortunately, with the specifications, you can't include that within a project template. Project template is just when we set something up on the Autodesk Construction Cloud that it's available for every project that we create. So instead, what I do as a company, still a work in progress, is that we have one project with our typical specifications, and as we update them or create new versions of those specifications, and we release them to whoever's working on whichever projects, you can have a central repository for specifications. You don't have to redo them. Other guys, they spend, people have told me that they spend a lot of time on specifications on project, but there is something like that in there. And so you can definitely see that you don't need the standard systems or the processes that can be included. And then schedule pressures. So if things don't happen on a specific time, for argument, okay, so here's an interesting real world example. You're working in a 200-person vertically integrated company with about 100 engineers. Out of those 100 engineers, 20 of them are, argument's sake, structural, and another 20 are, say, mechanical. And for whatever reason, there was no common data environment, no single source of truth. And one of the engineering teams ended up working on the wrong files for a week. So 20 people at 1,000 rands, or about $100 an hour or whatever, been working for a week. Incorrect work, can't submit it, projects late, penalty fees, then people have to work late, they get irritated, the money's been wasted, and that is a very bad situation just from a design side. And similarly also on a construction side, if things are delayed, that means money. And so that's usually when tempers get get frayed. Now, if these things weren't issues, then you wouldn't have trouble. And so partly this is managing expectations. It is enforcing compliance, or co-opting compliance, should we say. And then also education and understanding. And once everybody understands what's going on and they buy into the process, then most of these issues can be mitigated, or eliminated, or at least mitigated to a large extent. The solutions, all right. So what are the solutions to these challenges? One would be to adopt a connected digital solutions. And what is that? Well, in the Autodesk world, it's essentially an ecosystem. And there we can see it's the Autodesk Construction Cloud. So this is an interesting link, the Autodesk Construction Resources. You can see that there is quite a few papers that were written around this. If you're interested in the return on investment, if you're a business owner and you're interested, what sort of return on investment can you expect? The guide to site collaboration, cost control, everything that we'll be talking about, green construction, lean construction, which is also quite a typical thing these days. But a lot of information that's available on the platform, and then also who you are, the project phases, the workflows, the firm types, the products, and the webinars. So there's a lot of things online that you can actually refer to see how it would fit your workflow. So this is overwhelming if you're not used to it, and you would go, all right, that's great. Now how do I actually adopt it? How do I get into that? Well, in my experience, usually a small team on a small project, or an R&D department to trial some of the solutions, see can it actually make you money. Often that is what everything is about, is money, and so we would like to have that better. All right, so focus on collaboration and design. We've already discussed that. You don't want people to work on the wrong files or at the wrong time or anything. It's just one source of truth, or something to refer to. Everybody's working on the correct files, and that's what we're looking for. Then invest in pre-construction workflows. Make sure that you get your submittals right, and that there's no problems on site. Qualified trade partners. So this is something that is a reality within America and other places, where they've got databases of contractors and the performance on projects, and then you can shop around and actually find qualified trade partners or people with a track record that can actually assist you on your project. In South Africa, that doesn't exist. And so what's better for us is just to do an investigation of a supply chain or proposed supply chain before the time, and see if we can either educate or equip and enable them before the project, so that it's actually in time for the project, that we can actually have that operating correctly. All right, so then bring BIM into the field. That's a big one. Again, in South Africa, we've got unique challenges. What do we have in terms of internet connectivity on site? If we're in a mining environment, do we have repeaters in the mine shaft so we can actually transmit down there? If you don't have internet connectivity, it does turn into quite a bit of a mission. We don't, as far as I know, we don't have Starlink within South Africa yet, or an equivalent solution, so we're waiting to see if that happens. It would be a good thing if that does happen, because then we can connect the sites to the licenses. Then improving the field communications as well. That's one, communications infrastructure, and two, having more devices and subscriptions on the site. That would be very good. All right, and then improve or set quality standards. That again with the forms, we've already shortly discussed that. And then invest in continued skills development and training. That is a big thing. If you don't have the skills development and training, then it doesn't help you put an iPad with a build license or with an ACC app on site. If whoever is there can't use it, then what are you going to do? If you can't use the technology, then that doesn't help either, and that takes training and skills development. Our jobs that we are doing these days are changing quite fast, and it's just one of those things. One has to continually develop and train one's workforce to stay abreast of the latest technological and digital developments. And then reducing construction rework, that's also an ongoing process, but the less mistakes we make and the better planning we do and the better intelligence we have about something, the better chance we stand of making a success of things. On small projects, it's not that easy to envisage a technology like this really coming into play. But quite often small projects turn into big, large projects, and then are you able to scale? And so that is also an issue. If you were contracted to do work in Qatar or in London or New York or someplace like that, then are you able to demonstrate that you can use the technology on their projects? And not having the projects, not having the ability to communicate on a platform like this would hamstring or would it might not necessarily disqualify you, but it would definitely work out negatively if you were being considered a potential trade partner, and then you find out that because you've never invested in the technology, you don't understand the technology, you can't be on the project, and that might be a very large, lucrative project. So definitely something to have a look at, but that is how we can overcome these issues. Reducing weight is important. The carbon management, I've read into this a little bit with the carbon management. It's not such a big thing again within South Africa, but in America it is, and you'll find that there are tools that can help you evaluate your designs with regards to carbon, embedded carbon. A very large part of the world's energy is actually sunk into buildings and then afterwards operating buildings, and so it is critical both from a design perspective, from forma at the very beginning through until the operations and maybe even the deconstruction, reusing the circularity, reusing the materials that are on site, and repurposing or circulating that raw materials into the processes. That's very important, but not so much a part of build. But the carbon management, how does build play into that? And the only real way that I can see is that become more efficient. If you're more efficient with the software, with the processes, with the actual construction, that means that you are using less energy and that you are harming the environment less during construction. That includes lean construction, so getting rid of extraneous roles or roles that don't play such a big part. Maybe you can do the job with fewer people, with less equipment, with less energy, through better design, enabling artificial intelligence, better planning, forward planning. Everything there plays a role. The more accurate you are, the more you can lean into prefabrication. So to my mind, it's arguable, when during COVID, when we saw those hospitals going up in Wuhan, blew my mind. It told me personally, the observation I made at the time was, this shows fantastic planning. It shows that somebody planned for a emergency response from the medical services, that they had supply chains lined up, and that they could, at a drop of a hat, demonstrate the ability to build these field hospitals in a very, very short space of time. And that is proper planning. It's not something that would have happened at the time. It's something that would have happened before the time. And then similarly, the equivalent response in New York was to go to existing buildings and retrofit them, which is also has great merit. And then the prefabrication, though, with either existing or new buildings. With existing buildings, it's easy. You go and you scan them, you design your services, you then prefabricate, put it on site and install. what's there is already there. So that's actually easier from a prefabrication perspective if you were going to prefabricate items to fit into the existing space. But if it's new and you have to build it from scratch, then you'll have to make sure that it is accurately constructed. And so today, I think the best example of a BIM process, and one of my aspirations is to see something like that in action, is the construction of a gigafactory, SpaceX or Tesla gigafactory. That to my mind sounds like a very interesting process as well. Most of the pre-construction is done off-site. The components are brought on-site using trucks and trains, and then constructed on-site. And so that would be, for me, an interesting exercise to see how much can prefabrication play into it. But everything comes together. If it's accurate construction, you can do prefabrication. Predictive analytics. We said that with the forecasting tool within the cost module, we can definitely look into that. BIM coordination, that's, from a BIM coordination perspective, that's actually a no-brainer. That's done on the design side. Bringing that on-site, there's an interesting workflow that I've recently explored that I'd maybe just like to show you quickly, where we can identify assets based on the global unique identifier or barcode. And there are technologies where, if you print, say, for argument's sake, a QR code, and you stick it onto a piece of equipment and you scan it with your phone, then you can actually open that within the model and expose the information around that element to you. And so I'm still in the process of getting that to work properly, but I've done the bare basics so it actually looks nice. And then circularity as well. I think Dame Ellen MacArthur, with her reusing of equipment and aim to get plastics out of the ocean, a big driver of something like that. Right, so let me just, as a quick introduction, just show you something over here. This is a building that we are currently adopting at Micrographics, where we're trying to show the interoperability of software and what have you. And then inside of here, I've already done it for Windows. For instance, there's Windows. And in that window, you can see that I've created a shared instance parameter. Shared instance parameter is just Revit is a database. You can import information in, or so on, and then if you attach it as a project parameter, then you can see there's the element. Let's edit that, and we see that it's applied to currently only Windows, but it might also be something like a door. All right, so each of the categories that you want to apply those globally unique identifiers to would work. And if you then click on the door, you can see that it's got an empty field over there. Interesting one was raised recently. I just had a look at it actually online. Jeremy Dummick discussed it. He's the building coder, and the question that was asked was around this IFC GUID, and saying that if you do an IFC export, then one of the options is for you to create this IFC GUID. You can actually control this IFC GUID from here. So you can actually, it's read and writable, so you can actually type something in there and overwrite it. And it's my intention to replace this with the Revit ID. And I don't know if that's actually possible, but I think before I do an IFC export, I would actually do that. And in my case, what I'm doing is I'm saying, well, this Revit element has an ID, and the ID is something that I can expose the GUID through something called Dynamo. It's a relatively simple process. We can actually write it through onto the IFC export parameter as well. I'm actually going to try that, because sometimes on a project, if you do the mapping of elements onto barcodes within the assets of build, then we want to have that from different vendors, and if you use an IFC export, then of course that's going to be common to everybody. So the idea would be to select all the doors, whatever doors there are. So there would be some doors, and then if we run that, it should map onto the doors the global unique identifiers. So there's the doors global unique identifier, and then one would also be able to set the IFC GUID in a similar manner. So, you know, if you had to use the same methodology over there, I just want to get the name of this IFC GUID, small and then big. Someone could do the same thing over here. If we went back over here, you can also set the parameter by name. So there's the global unique identifier, it still feeds into that. And then with regards to the parameter name, if we add that as IFC GUID, and that's the parameter name. Let's see if we run it. It doesn't like that. Element set parameter, no parameter found by that name. Those are the doors. Let's just have a look at all the elements of the character unique identifier. The parameters, set parameter by name. Okay, those are the names. One would probably have to do a bit of work on that, but I suspect that one would be able to set the parameters based on. Let's freeze that. Run. Come on, show me the parameters. Can we see IFC parameters in there? IFC GUID. IFC GUID. Is it capital I? It's capital I. Okay, so apologies for that. That's IFC GUID. Let's see if that works. Let's unfreeze that and run it. Save and run it. And there it would have written the item through to there. So we'll probably find now that the IFC GUID is exactly the same as the Revit ID. So if we had to convert this to an IFC file, then the IFC GUID would still be the same as the Revit GUID. And this is a unique identifier. The chances that anything else on the planet is called by the same GUID is actually very slim. So that's why we use them, and they're identifiers. And based on this, we can actually go back into the Autodesk Construction Cloud, into Build, and you'll see something that was done over here. I know we're running out of time. Just to show you one of the ways in which you could use Build, which I've been investigating recently, is that you can then set up your assets. Usually we load models up. Obviously these would be, well, not obviously, I suspect these would be stage complete models. There are models that you can upload. There are assets, permissions that you can apply. There are status sets that you can choose. I've actually created my own, but I don't particularly like using anything custom. I actually like the default. So these are the, you can add or remove from that, but you can see there are statuses for elements that come on site. So that's quite often something that happens on site is somebody delivers a piece of equipment, and now you need to go and identify that equipment and say, what is the status? Has it been specified? Has it been ordered? Has it been delivered? Has it been installed? Is it pre-startup, startup, pre-functional performance test, functional performance test? So during the commissioning, and then the acceptance and the post-acceptance. So whereabouts is it within that, and can you graphically identify that status within a model? There are custom fields we spoke about. There are system categories. Those would be things like if you have cold water or hot water or supply or return or something like that, and there's asset categories after that. So I'm still trying to think about how to do this. Currently I'm doing this per unit class, but you can see that you can actually identify then assets within that. And the big thing is, if you open the model, ultimately you'll see that you've got the ability to let's duplicate this tab. If you go into the doc side of things there, then I'm just going to navigate to the published model that I envisage to be a stage complete model for this company, for the company team. I'm going to put that's on A5. There's the model, and that's the model that I'm interested in. And if you open this model, you see now that the assets have been created, and then you've actually got the actual asset and uploaded the GUID, and that's maybe something I could have shown over here, but you can actually, when you create the asset, you can map parameters on. And the result of that is if you go to your assets over there, you can actually filter assets if you'd like. You can say, right, show me assets based on a certain status or a location or a category or whatever. And then over here you can see, okay, so there are some doors and some windows. I've identified these doors. If I click on the door, You can even gain access to the the QR code. And so if you print this onto a sticker and you stick it onto the door, then if you come along there with a cell phone and you scan that QR code with your app, it will open that for you as an asset, and you can either then complete some other form with quality assurance or quality checking or whatever it is. So if you're physically on site, just by having that the GUID of that element, and then also having whatever forms, checklists, or quality assurances, are you taking pictures, images, can you identify that within the model, navigate there on your phone, even just a cell phone. And so you can see, I can envisage this from a manufacturing perspective. I've seen this on in the mechanical engineering environment, but you can start treating the building exactly like you would a normal manufacturing environment, and saying, well, it's just something that we're manufacturing, and can we identify its component, and do we have the information about the component? Do we know what the construction history of it is? It traceable? Can we, if something is wrong, can we assign the issue so we can track that issue? Can we actually gain some form of control on the site? Obviously, with common sense and pragmatism running the show, but if you generate too much information, I'm not sure if having an obsessive compulsive person on a site is always a good thing, but maybe sometimes it is if you want things to be done properly. I've often joked that if you anyway, it's not for telling jokes, but obsessive compulsive disorder is something that could be seen as a disability, but also a boon to anybody that wants to have something done properly. So maybe it's good to put them in charge. We can forgive them their obsessiveness, and then get a better product at the end of the day. So that's a good idea then. Anyway, as a summary, you've never had a better chance to adopt this technology. Currently, the entry-level build license is coming in cheaper than a docs license. I know many of you have an AEC collection that you don't necessarily have you'd have to purchase a license of build over and above. But if you only have a docs license, or you're only going to purchase a docs license, then just get yourself a build 550. It's cheaper than a docs, and you get docs. So I mean, it really is an incentive to get or to learn some of the abilities. And if only one of these technologies can make you money and pay for the software, then you've got time to adopt the other technologies, and why wouldn't you want to do that? So there's a lot of technology here. There's a lot of scope for training, for adoption, and if even one of these pays for itself on your project, then you've paid for the licenses, and the rest is just going to be a bonus. And depending on who you are, what your workflow is, that might be worth your while. I know I would definitely be interested if I was a construction company or a project manager or anybody on the construction side of things, even a BIM consultant or somebody that's driving the project, has the ability to help influence the decision makers to say, right, listen, are we going to adopt this technology, and to what extent are we going to adopt this technology? At least just do a cursory investigation into the supply chain to see if it's something that would be adopted and applied. I know that there are issues in South Africa with guys, like how do you adopt the technology if nobody can use the technology, right? So there might be an opportunity, a social responsibility, or transferring of skills to a community, or to there might be some ways in which you can justify running out the technology onto the subcontractors, especially in South Africa. I know that's typically a thing, but even if not, then we've had situations where a large contractor might be on site, but they say, all right, at least we'll get one license to communicate back to the design office, just with regards to RFIs and so on, and also with the project manager. So in the extreme, maybe just one license on site with a construction manager, but maybe feeding back the information, having the communication back onto the design and management team. Right? So note also that build 550 license can be upgraded to build 5,000 or build unlimited, and that we can adopt you, or we can assist you with the adoption of the technology. It's obviously very difficult to set up a project if you're not on a project. and a lot of the time it's a symbiotic relationship between ourselves and our clients, in the sense that we're along with them on this journey, and with our connection to Autodesk and the resources available, we can definitely lead what we don't know or what we are not experts in. If it falls outside of our scope, we can then facilitate the interaction with Autodesk if necessary. They do have a lot of experienced people leading these projects, people that were construction managers on some of the largest projects globally, overseas, in America and other places. And so definitely the experience and the knowledge is there. It's just how to apply that, in this case in South Africa, and how to get it adopted, and how to leverage the opportunities that we have to upskill our supply chains to perform as required, and possibly to then broaden our reach to projects in other parts of Africa and the world. We're already doing that on the design side. That's done. But can we also do that on a managerial side? So, if what would be the difference between a construction manager sitting in an office in Cape Town and managing a project in Johannesburg, if they're not flying up there so often, to somebody that's doing that project in, for argument's sake, Addis Ababa or somewhere in the Middle East? To my mind, there's very little or no difference, and all that you really need is an internet connection and the license, the capability, the skills, and what else you've got. So maybe there's an opportunity also to grow the market into those spheres. So with that, it's basically finished. There's no questions that I can see within the chat, so I hope that you found that interesting. And if you do have any further questions, don't hesitate to contact us at Micrographics. We are always happy to facilitate the conversation. And remember that you've also got the Autodesk Construction Cloud, the Autodesk University. That's currently going. It's the last day today, I think, or the second last day. The Micrographics YouTube channel that's available, Micrographics webinar series, and our Micrographics blog. So lots of opportunity for you to browse and see what is of interest to you. But the easiest way to get hold of us is just to contact us directly at Micrographics, www.mgfx.co.za. That's M for Mike, G for Golf, F for Foxtrot, X for X-ray. Or you can email us at info@M for Mike, G for Golf, F for Foxtrot, X for X-ray.co.za, info@mgfx.co.za, and we'll be happy to have the conversation with you and find out how can we be of assistance adopting this exciting new digital technology on the construction site, and hopefully build a better future for ourselves and those to come. Until next time, best of luck with your projects, and enjoy the Autodesk Construction Cloud. Bye now.